She only wanted a chance. A quiet request, nothing more. Just to step onto the range and prove herself. But instead of respect, she was met with laughter. Not just from strangers, but from the very man in charge, the colonel. To him, she didn't belong. To him, her skin, her gender, her presence were enough to disqualify her before a single shot was fired. Yet what happened next turned that moment of mockery into a story no one in that base would ever forget. Because sometimes, the ones underestimated the most leave behind the deepest mark. Will you witness how she changed everything? She wasn't born into privilege, nor did she grow up with doors opening easily for her. From a young age, discipline was her anchor, early mornings running on cracked sidewalks, evenings spent studying by dim light, pushing herself further than anyone expected. She carried herself with quiet determination, never asking for special treatment, only for a fair chance. Her dream was clear: to serve, to protect, to rise through the ranks in a system that wasn't built for her. On that military base, every day felt like a test she wasn't meant to pass. Whispers followed her in the mess hall, glances lingered too long during drills, and respect was given to others long before it was offered to her. Still, she kept going, believing that one moment, a chance to prove her worth, could silence it all. That chance came when she set her sights on the shooting range. For others, it was routine. For her, it would be the battlefield where prejudice met undeniable skill. What no one realized then was that a single request, spoken with calm conviction, would soon shatter every limit placed on her. The morning she finally walked up to the colonel's office to request permission for the shooting range, the air itself felt heavy. She had rehearsed her words 100 times, steady and respectful, because she knew the cost of being misunderstood. But respect was not what greeted her. The colonel leaned back in his chair, smirking as if the very idea of her standing shoulder to shoulder with the men on that range was comedy. His laugh was sharp, dismissive, and it echoed louder than the rifles ever could. Around the room, a few others joined in. Not because they doubted her, but because mocking her was safer than standing with her. Still, she stood tall. She repeated her request, calm but unshakable, knowing that every chuckle, every glare, every whispered word was another wall being built around her. The colonel granted her permission at last, not out of respect, but out of arrogance, believing that humiliation on the range would break her faster than any order he could bark. Word spread quickly. By the time she walked onto the gravel of that firing line, soldiers had gathered like it was a show. Their eyes carried the same message: prove us wrong or prove us right. She could feel the weight of history pressing against her chest, the centuries of doubt, the unspoken rule that someone like her didn't belong in this space. And yet, she laid her hands on the weapon with the quiet confidence of someone who had prepared for this moment long before anyone else believed she could. The first shot cracked through the air, sharp and precise. A few heads turned, murmurs rising in the crowd. She didn't pause. One after another, her shots tore through the target, each one louder than the colonel's laughter had been. And still, she wasn't done. But as her accuracy grew undeniable, so did the tension. Whispers turned into silence. Silence turned into unease. And then, resentment. Because what was unfolding wasn't just skill, it was a dismantling of their certainty, a rewriting of the roles they thought were fixed. Shot after shot, she was no longer just a soldier at the range. She was a challenge, a threat to the unspoken rules that had kept people like her at the margins. And though every bullet she fired struck the target, it also struck deeper, at the pride of men who built their authority on her exclusion. When the colonel's face tightened, when his jaw clenched as the final round hit dead center, it was clear. This was no longer about practice. This was a battle of dignity, and she was winning. But the range was only the beginning. The real test, the one that would shake the entire base, was still waiting. The air was electric, charged with disbelief and hostility. Every soldier on that range had gone silent, their eyes locked on the impossible. Her target sheet, riddled with perfect marks, cleaner than any they had ever seen. Yet the silence wasn't respect. It was fury. The colonel's smirk had vanished, replaced by a stare so sharp it could cut through steel. His authority had been challenged in front of everyone, not by another officer, not by a decorated veteran, but by the very person he had laughed at, dismissed, and mocked. To him, this wasn't just about shooting, it was about control, and control was slipping from his hands with every flawless shot she had fired. Then came the moment that would turn whispers into history. The colonel demanded she attempt what few men had ever dared, a grueling endurance trial designed to break the strongest. It was clear he wasn't asking to test her skill. He was ordering it to see her fail, to strip her dignity under the weight of exhaustion and eyes that wanted her downfall. The crowd pressed in, waiting, almost hungry for her collapse. Sweat dripped, muscles trembled, lungs screamed for air, but she refused to yield. Each pull of the trigger, each flawless strike against impossible odds, carried more than her own weight. She was carrying generations who had been told, "You don't belong," and she was refusing to let them be erased. By the end, when the final record was shattered, not bent, not matched, but obliterated, there was no laughter left to hide behind. The colonel stood frozen, humiliated, his authority cracked like the splintering echoes of the last bullet. And as the crowd looked on, it became undeniable. This wasn't just victory. This was defiance, turned into history. But victory came at a price, and the weight of what followed would prove even heavier than the trial itself. When the dust settled, the range was no longer just a place of practice. It had become a battlefield where history shifted. She walked away without a trophy, without applause, but with something far greater: proof. Proof that talent, grit, and determination could shatter walls built from prejudice and doubt. Yet even in her triumph, the silence from those who had mocked her spoke volumes. No congratulations, no acknowledgement, just cold stares from a system that refused to admit it had been wrong. For her, the victory was personal, but also painfully public. She carried the weight of knowing that her success wouldn't erase the barriers for others who looked like her. It wouldn't stop the laughter, the whispers, the dismissals that countless black women and men still face every single day. What she had done was extraordinary, but it was also a reminder of how much more needed to change. Because this wasn't just about a shooting range or a record broken. It was about dignity. It was about proving that worth should never be measured by the color of someone's skin, their gender, or the bias of those in power. Her story forces us to ask, how many more voices have been silenced before they ever had the chance to be heard? How many more dreams have been dismissed before they could take flight? And how long will it take for a society built on exclusion to finally learn that greatness knows no boundaries? The colonel laughed that day, certain she would fail, but in the end, it was his arrogance, not her courage, that was defeated. And the echo of her victory still asks us all, when will we stop underestimating those we should have been honoring all along?